This is section 631. We're going to introduce summations. So in this lesson, we're going to find the sum of expressions in summation notation. So what is this summation notation? So there's a few elements of it. So let's dissect this symbol right here. Well, that phrase, this little weird E-looking thing, that is sigma in Greek. Now, the reason why I use that word sigma is because S, just think S summation. Sigma, S summation. So this is telling me I need to add up. Okay, that's basically what it is. Okay, so now add up what? And so the next piece here, this is actually my sequence. So what we're actually going to do is find the terms of my sequence and then add them up. That's it. So everything is like normal. You plug in the values to find the terms. You just need to add them up. That's basically the last step. Now, this is where you start, and then this is where you end. So it tells you this is the first value you need to plug in, and you keep adding them up until then it gives you the last value. Now, the last little thing I want to mention is we're also going to introduce this notation called a factorial. Now, what a factorial is you start with that factor, and you can tell it's a factorial because it's this exclamation point. But you start with that factor, and then you multiply each factor counting down by 1. So counting down by 1, counting down by 1, counting down by 1, all the way until you have 1. So the example that I give is this 7 factorial is 7 times 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. If I had 8 factorial, you'd start at 8, and then you'd multiply it down. If I had 100 factorial, then you start at 100, and then you multiply down. So you just start at the factor, or start at the value, and you multiply counting down. Factorial. So let's look at this first one here. So it's a summation. It means I want to add them up, but it's saying plug in starting with my first term, and then end at 4. Okay, so you plug in 1, so that's 100 to the first power. Plug in 2, plug in 3, plug in 4. That's it. Like, effectively, that's it. You're just going to add them up. You enter that into your calculator, and so you just plug that into calculator, and you get your answer. Look at this next one. So if I plugged in 0, so we're starting at 0 and we're ending at 4. So if I plugged at 0, we're going to add that by plugging into 1. Add that to plugging into 2. And then 3. And then 4. Now we're stopping at 4, so it said start at 0, so there's the start, and then it ends at 4. So now I just need to simplify it. Now I know I didn't mention it, but 0 factorial is 1. So this is 1/2 plus 1 factorial, so that's still 1/2, plus this is 2 times 1 plus 3 times 2 times 1 plus 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Now the 2's cancel out here, 2's cancel out here, 2's cancel out here. So we get, and then this is another thing, you're just going to enter that into your calculator. 3 times 1 is 3. 4 times 3 is 12. You just enter into calculator. Now, these could also be algebraic expressions, and that's okay. So in this instance, it's going to be an algebraic expression, no big deal. So plugging in 1. So we're starting at 1, we're ending at 5, we are going to add them together. So plugging in 1, add that to plugging in 2, Add that to plug in 3. Add that to plug in 4. And add that to plug in 5. Now, we're not going to have to like super simplify it, but there's some things that you can simplify, right? So for example, this is -1 squared. -1 times -1 is +1. So 1 times x minus 1 to the first, which is just x minus 1. We're going to add that to, now this is 3. So -1 times -1 times -1, that's negative. So we're going to get negative and then x minus 1 squared all over 2. And then that's going to be positive. And then to the 5th, so that's going to be negative. Going to be even, so it's positive. There we go. That's my answer. So, what did we learn today? We learned about summations. So, if you ever see this symbol, that means summation. We are adding. Down here is where we start. Up here is where you end. And then the next piece, and then you just add up all the terms. The next piece is going to be factorial. If I had 5 factorial, that means you start with the number that it gives you, and you multiply each factor counting down by 1 until you get to 1. This does conclude our lesson. If you have any other questions, please leave them in the comments.